This week we're going to switch it up. Usually we do try to do the pick and roll here, but it's becoming that time of the year where you could really start to evaluate teams and potentially see them being real NBA title contenders. I want to mention 5 teams that could make a trade right now that could potentially push them a little bit closer to getting the Larry O'Brien by the end of the season. And Danny is going to rank them in order of they should make a trade all the way to the team that should not, or the least forced to make a trade out of the bunch. All right, we'll give you number 1, Danny. Number 1 team that I think should make a move, the New Orleans Pelicans. And I'll tell you why in a moment. Here's the players that they could potentially trade in a deal. Herbert Jones, Trey Murphy, Najee Marshall, Brandon Ingram, Zion Williamson, Jordan Hawkins. Obviously you're not trading these guys, but those are players that I'm looking at because that's a lot of wings, Danny. And I don't think they don't need all of those wings in order to be the best version of themselves. Again, Herbert Jones, Trey Murphy, Najee Marshall, Brandon Ingram, Zion Williamson, Jordan Hawkins, and obviously Brandon Ingram and Zion Williamson are already big-time moneymakers in terms of salary. So you can't dedicate too much salary to that position with those guys already being there. Okay, the next team, the Oklahoma City Thunder. Right now, a top 3 team in the Western Conference. Who knows how long that lasts? Rest assured, they got a squad over there, and they're definitely on the younger side with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Chet Holmgren, J-Dub. They could potentially, Danny, trade for a 3-and-D player and maybe get them a little bit playoff ready. Get a player that can guard the LeBrons of the world. Get a player that could potentially guard, a Luka Doncic of the world. Then
you have the defensive and veteran leadership is what you're looking for.
Yeah, that wouldn't hurt. But obviously they're still young. They don't need to do anything, especially with all the draft picks that they have in their arsenal. The Orlando Magic, probably the biggest shock of the NBA season so far. Top 3 team in the Eastern Conference. They could just say, we'll roll with what we got. Or they could look at their point guard slot and say, maybe we can trade some of our assets and actually get a real starting point guard, depending on how much they believe in their young rookie. I don't need to explain the 76ers too much because we all understand the situation with the 76ers and all the assets they got in the James Harden deal. And then, Danny, a team that you played on, the Cleveland Cavaliers, right now, out of the playoff race in the Eastern Conference, really haven't gotten their footing as it stands right now. And there's always going to be this big question, Danny, about Evan Mobley and Jared Allen. Can they actually coexist on an NBA title team, considering the fact that both of them are not 3-point shooters? So those are the 5 teams. I'll say them one more time. Pelicans, Oklahoma City Thunder, Orlando Magic, 76ers, and the Cavaliers. Out of those 5 teams, who absolutely needs to make a trade? Number 1.
I'm going to go backwards. I think the least likely that needs to make a trade is Philly. Then I'm going to put OKC at number. I think there's 5 teams or 6 teams.
Give me the teams. So
teams that
going backwards.
It's 5 teams or 6 teams. You have 6 teams. So I'm putting Philly at 5, and I'm putting OKC at 4. I think
that's interesting.
I think number 1 would be New Orleans Pelicans. I think there's too inconsistent, and they have so many wings. So I think they need to make a trade to get them, push them right where they need to be in the contention, and not have to be worried about the play-in, and make sure they're in the playoffs and actually can give other teams a run and get out of the first round. They can sneak somebody and win. Let's
talk about the Pelicans real quick. I think I know what I would do if I was a general manager and I was looking at that roster. If I was the Pelicans, I'm curious what you would do if you were to. I named 6, 7 wings. They're like, that's not feasible, especially when they're that talented to retain all of them. So what would you do?
Yeah, is a good 3. I would use some of those wings to get a DeMar DeRozan or somebody like that if you could. If you want to,
interesting.
That gives you a little more consistency on the offensive end. I feel like they do have some good shooting, but I would not let go of Trey Murphy. I think he's too intricate. I think he's very well rounded and a good potential star player in our league. I think he'd be very good for them. But the other guys, I think, are not.
I like Herb Jones too, though.
I like Jordan Hawkins, but I just said they're not untouchable. That's all I'm saying. So if you get a guy like a DeMar, I'm not saying necessarily it would be DeMar, but if you can get a guy like that, if you get another star player that can come in and give you some consistent, a different refresh on the offensive end, because they always have injuries with CJ, or if you wanted another solid, real point guard, that's something I would look at as well. If you can find that, which is tough to do in this league, that's just a pure point guard that can facilitate and set the tone.
That's what I had on my list. If I was to trade one of those wings, I'd want a pure point guard.
CJ is a point guard, but he's not he's more of a scoring two guard. In Portland, he's more of a two, and he's naturally more of a two guard, shooting guard. But he is playing the point guard. He can play the point guard, but I would like to have him off the ball, some able to just score as well. So I would get a pure point guard, or let's say another star wing, or another, like, combine those and get one stable, good wing and 3-and-D wing guy to go with Trey Murphy and to make that a lethal.
And BI and Zion. Yeah, I mean,
exactly.
Oof. They have when they're healthy, they pose a lot of problems, and when they're healthy, it also enables them to take that team to another level via trade, which could be another problem for the Western Conference and the NBA. We'll see how they handle it there in New Orleans. I love the potential of this roster, not just what they are, but what they could be.
Yes, and the other two teams.
Yes, let me give you number 2.
Cleveland Cavaliers. And you said the Orlando Magic. I'm gonna go with Cleveland Cavaliers, man. They're just not living up to the expectation that we thought. That the signings they made some great moves this offseason. You thought they were gonna be really good. For some reason, they're taking some hits and some bad losses. The one against Portland was tough. They've lost more games, and the coexistence of Evan Mobley, and now they're looking at also not just that, the coexistence of Darius and Donovan. Like, now you have two groups of guys that you're like, does this make sense? They're both scoring smaller guards in that backcourt, which kind of gives you some like your defensive liability in that situation. You have two small guards. It's hard to beat, especially
with Max Strus at the 3.
Your smaller, backcourt at this when you have those guys in the lineup. Your front court is oversized; they can't shoot as well. Like, you have to mix it up some way somehow. But I'm not saying those 4 guys need to go. But I think we need to find the right pieces. I thought Strus was a good piece. I thought George was too. But you have to change the lineup some, and you got to find some more depth. Either that, or find another star that you can package the guys that you feel don't work together, and then either keep 2 of them. And it's either Donovan and Evan, or Darius and Jared, however you want to do it. Or at least keep 3 of them. You know what I'm saying? One of those guys would have to go, and then you figure it out and get another star, another bigger wing player, and go that route. But I think they're at number 2 in a team that needs to make a trade. So number 1 is New Orleans, New Orleans Pelicans, and then actually I might have put Cleveland at number 1. Because I think New Orleans.
Yeah, if you think about it,
Cleveland needs it more than New Orleans does, because New Orleans we didn't have the expectation from them to do well. They're doing better than they did last year, and then they're living. All other teams Orlando's higher than we expected. Cleveland's the only team that's not exceeding or playing at the expectation we thought they would, and they're below that. I think they're in need of a trade more than anybody. So they're number 1. New Orleans number 2. Orlando Magic number 3. Number 4 would be the Thunder, and then number 5 would be the Sixers.
Now, I find that I'm on pace with you with that list. I had the Cavaliers towards the bottom 2, but when you think about the expectation that they got to get to, and the big, I don't think people wonder if New Orleans is going to work. I think the question is, will they be healthy? And then we could evaluate. Yes, I think with the Cavs, even though they don't have too much proof of concept, but they've only been together 1 year, right? The core of this team. Mm-hmm. Even still, I think you look at it and you say to yourself, I don't think that's going to work. Like Mobley and Jared Allen, and then to your point, you could also look at the backcourt. So maybe the Cavs should be number 1 in a team that should make a trade. Number 2, the Pelicans. Here's what shocked me. I thought you would have definitely put, if you put Cavs 1, I thought the 76ers wouldn't be last on your list. Why are they not? How did they become last? Considering the assets they have.
They have a lot of assets. I just don't think it's a need for them. I think they should. Not only the fact that I'm biased, because I think it would open up a situation for me to be able to come back and play there. But I think out of those 5 teams, they're the least in need of a trade, because they're already a top 3 team in my eyes in the East. They're winning games, top 3 or 4. They're already in the playoffs, and they can be contenders with the group they have. The other 4 teams actually need something to get them either solidified in the playoffs or playoff contention. However, Philly is just they're in the playoffs. I have contention. Now they're not serious contenders. They're on the brink of contention with their group, but they're definitely a top 4 team in the East and making the playoffs with the group they have already.
Fair
Those
enough.
other
Fair
four
enough.
teams are not.
Well, oh, well,
OKC, they're
well,
top four. They're in the playoffs, but I
oh,
don't know if they're a top four
yes,
team. But
gotcha.
that's why they're the number five. That's why they're number five.
Yeah, and fortunately for them, they do have time to kind of wait it out as well
For sure.
because they are so young and they do have a number of their players under contract and they have all those assets. They could take their time. I think the Magic. I I'm not. I don't believe in the Magic. I'm gonna have to. They're gonna have to show
But
me.
they're exceeding
And
expectations. So
for sure, yes.
they're not. They're
Until
not in
then,
panic mode. They're not in panic mode. That's why they're number three on the list. They're right in the middle.
fair enough. Fair enough. And then as you mentioned, the Pelicans number two, because you never know. And then number one being the Cleveland Cavaliers. I didn't think the segment would go that way with the Cavaliers being number one, but it makes all the sense in the world.